Ah, the peculiar dance of attachment, the waltz where one partner fears losing themselves while the other fears losing the other. Welcome, dear friends, to a tale as old as time, yet as freshly perplexing as ever. Avoidance and the fear of losing control in relationships. It is a curious thing, this fear of losing control, a shadow that often trails those who prefer to keep their emotions neatly folded and stowed away, like a well-pressed handkerchief in the breast pocket of their existence. Now, let's imagine for a moment an old, charmingly cluttered bookstore, the type with aisles so narrow that you must turn sideways to pass, and shelves so tall they seem to reach for the secrets of the universe. Here, amidst the dust and paperbacks, we find our protagonist, a man named Edward. Edward, you see, is an avoidant. His heart is a fortress, fortified by the battlements of independence and the high walls of self-sufficiency. Yet within these walls resides a poignant paradox, the fear of losing control, of being overtaken by the unpredictable tides of intimacy. Edward's story begins, as many do, with a chance encounter. On a rainy Tuesday, as the heavens wept upon the city, he stumbled into the bookstore seeking refuge. There, he met Clara, a woman with a penchant for mystery novels and a laugh that could melt the iciest of hearts. She was warmth personified, and in her presence, Edward felt an unfamiliar flutter, a sensation both exhilarating and terrifying. Now, Edward was no stranger to relationships, but he had always prided himself on maintaining a careful distance. To him, love was like a delicate wine, to be sipped sparingly, lest it overwhelm the senses. Clara, however, was an entirely different vintage, a bold, heady blend that teased the edges of his carefully maintained control. As their friendship blossomed, Edward found himself caught in a curious predicament. On one hand, he reveled in Clara's company, her stories, and her zest for life. On the other, he feared the loss of control that her presence represented. It was a dance he knew all too well, one step forward, two steps back. This fear of losing control is a hallmark of the avoidant attachment style, a defense mechanism crafted from past experiences and emotional scars. It's a fear rooted deep within the psyche, whispering insidious lies. If you get too close, you'll lose yourself. If you open your heart, you'll be vulnerable to pain. And so Edward did what many avoidants do. He built walls, hoping they might shield him from the storm of emotions that Clara stirred within him. In the weeks that followed, Edward's internal conflict grew. He found himself oscillating between moments of intimacy and profound withdrawal. It was as if he were a pendulum, swinging wildly between the desire for connection and the need for solitude. Clara, perceptive as she was, noticed these shifts and approached Edward with gentle curiosity. "Edward," she said one evening, as they sat together in a cozy corner of the bookstore, "I've noticed that sometimes you pull away just when we seem to be getting closer. I don't want to intrude, but I care about you and want to understand." Her words, tender and unassuming, struck a chord within Edward. It was a moment of truth, a climactic juncture at which he could either retreat into the safety of his emotional fortress or take a tentative step toward vulnerability. He chose the latter, albeit with trepidation. "Clara," he began, his voice tinged with vulnerability, "it's not that I don't care. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's just, I've always been afraid of losing control, of letting someone in too close." Clara listened intently, her eyes filled with empathy. "I understand," she replied softly, "but you don't have to face it alone. Relationships are about sharing the load, finding balance together." And there it was, an unexpected turn, a revelation that perhaps control need not be synonymous with isolation. In that moment, Edward realized that the fortress he had so carefully constructed might also be a prison of his own making. Perhaps by loosening the reins, he might discover a new kind of freedom, one that allowed for both independence and intimacy. With time and patience, Edward and Clara navigated the complexities of their relationship, learning to trust and communicate openly. It wasn't always easy, of course. There were moments of doubt and discomfort, times when Edward's instinct to retreat resurfaced. Yet, through it all, Clara remained his steadfast anchor, reminding him that love need not be a loss of control, but rather an expansion of it. As Edward's story unfolds, we are reminded that the fear of losing control is not a weakness, but a part of the human experience. It is a fear that whispers to us all at some point in our lives, urging us to guard our hearts and protect our independence. Yet, it is also a fear that can be challenged and transformed, if only we have the courage to face it. And so, dear friends, as the dust settles in our imaginary bookstore and the tale of Edward and Clara draws to a close, let us carry with us a newfound understanding of avoidance and their fear of losing control in relationships. Let us remember that love, in its truest form, is not about possession or domination, but about connection and balance. It is a dance that requires both partners to lead and follow, to trust and be trusted, to embrace the unknown with open hearts. As we bid farewell to Edward and Clara, let us take a moment to reflect on our own relationships, on the ways in which we navigate the delicate interplay of control and vulnerability. Let us strive to be both brave and compassionate, to recognize that the walls we build to protect ourselves can also imprison us, and that true freedom lies in the willingness to let them down. In the end, the fear of losing control is but a shadow, a flicker in the grand tapestry of love and connection. It is a fear that can be faced, understood, and ultimately transcended. And in doing so, we may discover a richer, more fulfilling experience of love, one that embraces the beauty of uncertainty and the profound joy of shared vulnerability. For it is in the letting go, in the gentle surrender to the ebb and flow of life, that we find our true selves, our true partners, and our true purpose. So let us dance, dear friends, with grace and courage, and let us cherish the exquisite complexity of the human heart.
If you believe this video might help someone dear to you, share it with them. A small gesture on your part could mean the world to a friend in need.